My sister didn't even wait for the cake to come out. She stood up during Martha's birthday dinner, raised her drink, and told me this whole family is honestly ashamed to have you using our name. 30 relatives just stopped moving, Sarah. Our mom nodded her head. Robert, our dad, had a look on his face, like he was proud of her for saying what they were all thinking. I didn't yell back at her. I didn't start crying. I just sat there under the porch lights, being the quiet person they always expected me to be. But before anyone could take another bite of food, Grandma Martha pushed her chair back and stood up. The words she said next didn't just make the table go silent, they changed our lives forever. My name is Chloe, and I learned very young how to deal with being let down without showing it. In most homes, the oldest kid is the one everyone counts on. But in my family, it just meant I had to stand behind my younger sister Mia, so she could get all the attention. Mia is 2 years younger than me. She is 29, and we are nothing alike. While I was quiet and focused, she was always looking for a crowd. She had a way of making the adults laugh and brag about her. Sarah and Robert treated her like she was special, saying she was the one who would take the family business to the next level. They never said anything like that about me. At first, I didn't even mind. I just disappeared into the background. I still remember when I was 12 and won a big math contest. Dad looked at my results for a second and then turned to Mia, who was showing him how she had glued glitter to her sneakers. He told her she was very creative, but he told me not to brag about my grades. That was how our house worked. She was the star, and I was the one who just got things done. The only person who didn't act like that was Martha. To everyone else, she was the person who started the company, but to me, she was the one who would sit on the porch steps and ask me real questions. She wanted to know what I was thinking and what I wanted to do with my life. She gave Mia and me the same things, but she could see through Mia's act. Then there was my cousin Taylor, who is 2 years younger than Mia. She didn't live in our house, but she saw what was happening from the time we were in middle school. Whenever a family party went badly, she would come find me and whisper, "You noticed that too, right?" Taylor was my witness. She saw the favoritism and the way Mia always talked over me. By the time I finished college, I was used to being the person in the background. I got scholarships, worked at night, and paid for everything myself. I started a career in finance because numbers don't lie or interrupt you. I built a life for myself in Atlanta, far away from what my parents expected of me. But being far away didn't change the way they acted. Every holiday or phone call was just another stage for Mia. She would say things like, "When I'm running the company one day," like it was already decided. Sarah encouraged it, and Robert agreed, while I just let them talk without saying a word. 5 weeks before Martha's birthday, the invitations were sent out. I got a plain cream card, while Mia got a whole announcement with a professional photo of herself. Her caption said, "Managing Director Era." All our relatives filled her comments with praise, while mine were empty, just like always. Then Sarah sent me a text that really bothered me. It said, "Please behave at the party." It was like she thought I was the one who usually caused problems, even though I was always the quiet one. During those 5 weeks, the whole family started acting differently. Our group chat, which usually stayed quiet for months, was suddenly very busy. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years were posting old pictures with Martha, and my aunts were planning the food like it was a royal dinner. Mia was right in the middle of it all, posting a picture of herself standing in the lobby of the family enterprise building. She had her hand on her hip and looked like she owned the place. Her caption was "Stepping into the future," and everyone called her our new leader in the comments. I read every single comment like I was watching a parade from a window. My invitation hadn't been a big public thing. Martha had written it by hand and sent it to me in a simple envelope. I kept it because of what she wrote. "It would mean a lot if you came." 2 days later, Sarah's cold text arrived again, telling me to behave. I just typed "of course" and put my phone down, but I felt a heavy pressure in my chest. Around that time, Taylor called me. She didn't do small talk. She asked right away if I had seen how the family was acting. I told her I had. She lowered her voice and told me that Mia had been telling everyone she already knew what Martha was going to announce at the party. I was surprised Mia was acting like she had already been crowned as the boss. Taylor said Mia was already picking out new decorations for her office and saying Martha had hinted at giving her control soon. Taylor added that she had been helping Martha clean out some old papers and saw documents from a lawyer, and found out Martha had been visiting them several times lately. When I asked if it was about the business, Taylor said she wasn't sure because Martha didn't let her see the details, but she knew something big was happening. Mia was always celebrating things before they actually happened, but this felt different. As the party got closer, I felt more and more tense. Relatives started asking if I was doing okay, using a tone that made it sound like they felt sorry for me. Robert mentioned that this birthday would be special while looking proudly at Mia. Sarah reminded me twice in 1 week to look nice. By the time the day arrived, I felt like a string pulled so tight it was about to snap. When I parked near Martha's house that evening and saw Mia posing for photos at the door like she was the host, that feeling only got worse. By the time I walked into my grandmother's backyard that evening, the party felt like a coronation ceremony. There were white lanterns hanging everywhere, and you could smell the grilled food and rosemary chicken in the air. People were laughing very loudly, and everyone was gathered around one person. My sister was moving from group to group, giving out fake kisses and tossing her hair to make sure it caught the light every time a relative mentioned the family legacy or who was next in line. She smiled like she had practiced that moment in a mirror. My father walked right behind her, looking very proud, while my mother fixed my sister's necklace like she was sending her out for a big performance. As for me, I just sat down quietly at the very end of the long table. I wasn't trying to hide from them, I was just being exactly what they had trained me to be. Background noise? Dinner started with the sound of silverware and quiet talk. It was the kind of polite conversation that people use to hide how they really feel. I answered questions if anyone bothered to ask me something, and if they didn't, I just stayed quiet. It was a lot easier than trying to talk when nobody wanted to hear me. When it was time for dessert, my grandmother's favorite lemon cake, the lights were turned down and everyone gathered around to sing. My sister stood right at the head of the table, putting herself directly next to my grandmother as if she belonged there more than anyone else. The song ended, the candles were glowing, and my grandmother had that gentle smile she always wore. That is when it happened. My sister picked up her glass, and her smile turned into something cold and sharp under the party lights. She said she wanted to say something to the family before my grandmother made her big announcement. My stomach felt very tight. She turned toward me, looking at me with that mean, polished look she had spent years perfecting. She said clearly, loud enough for every person to stop moving their forks, "This family is honestly ashamed to have you using our name." A very heavy silence hit the table. My mother nodded her head, looking confident, like she had been waiting for someone to finally say those words out loud. My father made that specific face he uses when he agrees with something but doesn't want to say it himself. For a moment, the whole world was just the sound of ice and glasses and the smell of lemon cake, while I felt a burn behind my eyes. I picked up my wine glass just to have something solid to hold on to. I didn't say anything, I didn't move. I just sat there under the lights and let that shame settle into my chest like a weight I had carried my whole life. But something inside me changed. It wasn't anger or sadness, it was a steady feeling. While everyone else was looking at me, I noticed something they didn't. My grandmother, sitting in her chair, had stopped smiling. Her hand was sitting right next to her glass. She was looking at my sister, not with pride, but with a look I hadn't seen in a long time, a warning. At that moment, I felt the tight feeling inside me start to go away. It wasn't because I was breaking down, but because someone else had finally reached their limit. No one moved for a second. The backyard was so quiet that even the insects seemed to stop making noise. The candles were still flickering in the breeze, and every person at the table was looking back and forth between me and my sister, waiting for me to cause a scene. But I stayed still. The first sound was the slow noise of a wooden chair scraping against the stone floor. My grandmother pushed her chair back very slowly and on purpose. She fixed the blanket on her lap, touched her necklace, and then looked at my sister. The tension finally snapped. My sister looked confused for a second and then tried to smile, acting like she was still in control. My sister started to say she wasn't finished yet, but my grandmother raised one hand, and my sister stopped talking. The whole table went completely silent. When my grandmother spoke, she didn't yell, but her voice was very firm. She told my sister to sit down. Everyone looked shocked because my grandmother had never used that tone with her before. My sister tried to laugh it off, but my grandmother told her to sit down again even more firmly. My sister finally sat. My grandmother looked around the table until she saw me. Her face softened for a second, then got serious again. She said she had heard enough tonight and more than enough over the last few years. She looked at my sister and said she would not allow cruelty to be called confidence. My mother tried to speak up, but my grandmother told her to stop protecting things she refused to fix. My mother was stunned, and my father looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. My grandmother held the back of her chair and told everyone to hear her clearly. No one even breathed. She said that as of yesterday, the controlling interest of the family business belongs to me. The whole world felt like it was tilting. My wine glass shook in my hand. Someone at the end of the table gasped, and another person dropped their fork loudly. But my sister's reaction was the most intense. All the color left her face, and she looked like the breath had been knocked out of her. She whispered what, but my grandmother didn't blink. She told her she heard her correctly. My sister started shaking her head, saying it wasn't possible, and that she had been told she was the one. My grandmother stopped her and said that a legacy has to be earned, not just handed to the child who talks the loudest. My father stood up and told her to be reasonable, saying my sister had been preparing for this, but my grandmother snapped back that my sister had been performing, not preparing, and those things are not the same. My mother stood up too, looking very upset, saying this couldn't be legal. My grandmother told her it was legal, signed, and final. She told the whole group that the transfer could not be changed. Every word felt like a hammer hitting the table. My grandmother wasn't done. She said that in addition to the business, the Nashville house, the mountain cabin, and the seaside villa were also being given to me. My mother's jaw dropped, and my father's knuckles were white. My sister made a sound between a choke and a cry. She screamed that I was being given everything. My grandmother looked at her with no sympathy and said it was everything my sister assumed would be hers because she thought she was untouchable. My sister stood up and said she had worked for the family for years. My grandmother told her that just showing up to take photos is not work. She said my cousin had done more real work in one internship than my sister had done in her whole career. My cousin looked very surprised. Then my grandmother said that as of this week, my father and mother were being removed from the advisory board. My mother put her hand to her chest. My father tried to argue, but she told them she could do it, and she already had. My sister sat back down, shaking. She looked very small for the first time. All the relatives sat there in silence, not knowing what to do. My grandmother turned to me, and her voice got very soft. She told me I was the only one who ever valued what the family was built on: hard work and honesty. She said I never demanded attention, but I earned power quietly and consistently. She put her hand on my chair and told me I deserved the seat everyone else tried to keep from me. My sister started crying quietly. My mother whispered that this would tear the family apart. My grandmother said that cruelty had already done that, and tonight just showed the truth. She looked at everyone and said the future of the family was no longer about being entitled. My sister whispered my name like a plea. She told me I couldn't let this happen, and that I should tell our grandmother she was wrong. I looked at her for the first time, and I didn't see a golden child. I saw an adult who thought she was owed the world because people had always praised her. I told her quietly that I wasn't the one who created this moment, she did. Her face fell, and my grandmother nodded firmly. The decision was final. My grandmother suggested we finish the cake, but the party was basically over, at least for my sister it was. 6 months passed, and things didn't just calm down. Everything was completely different. The Monday after the party, I walked into the main office with the same quiet confidence I've always had. The difference was that now people actually looked at me. The board members welcomed me right away. By the end of that first week, my sister's things were cleared out of her office, and by the end of the month, her name was completely gone from all company reports. Our relatives who used to brag about her all the time went silent, not knowing how to act now that she wasn't the favorite anymore. My sister tried to find work elsewhere, but news travels fast, and every door she tried to open was closed firmly. My mom and dad had to deal with the results of being kicked off the advisory board. They had a hard time with their money and felt embarrassed in front of their friends. They finally realized that their position in the family wasn't as strong as they believed. The phone calls they made to me started to change from angry to guilty, and eventually they were just begging for help. I didn't block them, but I didn't give in to them either. My grandmother moved into my place in Atlanta soon after everything happened. Our home is very calm now, with no acting or fighting over who is more important. For the first time, I am living a life that actually belongs to me. I spent a lot of years making myself look small, but standing up for my own worth didn't break this family apart. It just showed everyone what was already broken.